Hello, good morning everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar with Veritas. So the webinar is going to be focusing on the importance of IT governance, and we're really pleased to be joined by Dan Jennings from Veritas and also Hugo Bradfield from Veritas, who are going to be presenting the webinar for you today.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. My name's Dan Jennings. I've been with Veritas for 19 years in various parts of the business as a support engineer through to a technical specialist, pre-sales specialist delivering HA and DR technology to customers. And then I've been working in the finance vertical specifically, and finally for the last 7 years with partners. And I've been really pleased to work with Bytes for a number of years now. And for the last 2 of those, we've been focusing quite heavily on IT governance. And I'm very happy about that because it's one of the most interesting, no, it's the most interesting thing I've ever worked on in all my time in the industry, partly because we're solving a business need with technology to help with IT governance, and partly because it affects my family and myself in everyday life, because everything that we ever do today seems to have some form of connection to some form of digital storage from some company, no matter what we do, whether we're just moving around with our phones, whether we're driving our cars and our head units are providing information, whether we're giving over information to organizations that we're buying from or selling to, or whether indeed we're interacting with local government or national government. It's a really, really important thing for brands to have good IT governance, not purely because, as is traditional in the IT industry, we use it as an insurance stick to beat people over the heads with, but because organizations that have good IT governance do better business. They are better organized because they're more confident. They know if they've got good structures in place to look after the lifeblood of their information, their business, their information, then they can be more confident about delivering projects. That's a really, really important point, because if they deliver better and more projects, they are either more profitable or they are more productive if they're in a government or a public sector space. So hopefully what I'll be able to do today, along with my colleague Hugo Bradfield, is explain to you how Veritas and Bytes can help with that IT governance process. Firstly, in terms of basic principles, and secondly, with a couple of technologies with real-world examples of how they're implemented, and help you get your hands around the idea that we can help on that, on the way to good governance, no matter what that means to your organization. So if I can move on slides now, which doesn't seem to be happening for reasons unknown. That's better. So Veritas and Bytes have developed a 3-step process. It's fairly simple in principle. It's called See, Move, Protect. And the C part is the part we're going to be focusing on here today. C really means turning data into actionable information. And that's absolutely critical to IT information governance. Because if we don't actually understand the lifeblood of the business, then we can't take action to deliver it properly, to protect it in the right way, to put it in the right places, to keep it for the right amount of time, and to delete it when we have to, when we're either mandated or it becomes a risk or it becomes a cost to the business. Okay, and there are a number of technologies that we can implement in order to help with that process. We're going to concentrate on 2 there called InfoStudio and Aptar today. What we'll do is we'll give you some ways that we help organizations to look after their information. Once we've laid the platform, or the foundation, if you like, of understanding what information is business relevant, where it should be putting it in the right place, deleting it when we need to, and being sure of who should own it and who should have responsibility for it, then organizations can move on to the next two sections that we use for information governance. We're not going to describe those in detail today, but those would be to move it to the right place for archiving, for delivery, for tier 0 storage if we want to use it for big data, current analysis, for instance, or we want to put it in the background in case of a ransomware attack or something, and then we'll move it. Then the last part is to protect it correctly, and protecting it means making sure that if an individual file or a file share or a line of business becomes unavailable because information has been either corrupted or it's been held for ransomware, or somebody's made a mistake within an organization, perish the thought, but it happens. We can get it back up and running as quickly as possible so business is unaffected. And we can automate all three of those parts, but we'll concentrate on C here. And I'm going to describe Information Studio. Now, Information Studio is the governance engine for unstructured information. Okay, so we're actually talking about data here. Hugo's going to go on to looking at the part around infrastructure governance, but I'm describing data governance here. Now, the very top left of that graphic there, the rather colourful graphic, we've got all sorts of information stores and sources. So as I mentioned before, we're generating information in ways undreamt of 20 years ago. And I won't bother going through all those again because, quite frankly, we hear that quite a lot. But we support 25 diverse sources of infrastructure to understand information that's being stored, but we also understand the sources of the information, where they're being generated and how they're being delivered to the business. And what we do with Information Studio is a superset of technology that we've had available to customers for the last 10 years. So it's very mature technology, but we're making it much more user-friendly now. It's much more intuitive, and you'll see the graphic there, which is a global graphic. It's one particular landing page that you could have as a home page. And as you would expect, you can just simply click on a data location and start to drill into information that's there. But say what really, because we can all find out how big a file share is. We can start to filter on that information based on whether that information is orphaned or who owns it, and we can select particular owners or lines of business. We can start to work out whether that information is stale and define what that means to us as a business. We can define what ages means, for instance, of information, so that we can work out whether information that's been stored, let's say, for instance, in one of the little graphics at the bottom right there, with a little bar chart, we've got a large amount of information stored between 9 and 12 months. I don't know what the resolution is like on your screens, but the biggest one there is between 9 and 12 months. And it was when that information was modified, but we can change that if we want to change the definition to when it was created, or when it was accessed, or we can define other parts. And then we can start to multiple filter and define what risk means, what location means, what line of business means, and create reports, real-time reports that help organizations understand what information is and where it is and who owns it. And it's really important to be able to click on a button and say, what is the amount of information that we've got today that's not business information? And we can help you define what business information means to you as an organization. And that is one part of Information Studio. But the second part, and the part that really helps with information governance and the automation of the workflow that leads on to putting information in the right place for the right amount of time, will be the classification engine that we have introduced to Information Studio. Now you will see a small graphic right in the middle of the screen there, which says classification. And we can apply over 200 out-of-the-box information governance standards from all over the world. Now, obviously, GDPR is in the news at the moment, but it might be Basel, it might be SOX. You might have a simple one that you define, PII, personally identifiable information, or you might want to define a custom one of your own for a subject access request, for instance. All of these things are possible with Information Studio, with the classification engine that we have. Once we apply a classification tag to information, and it is purely metadata, so we're not opening files, we're not compromising files at all, we're just applying more metadata. We can pass that on to, for instance, an archiving technology such as Enterprise Vault in order to make sure that we put it in the right archive for the right amount of time. We can pass it on for legal governance, and that's really important sometimes, and I'll come on to describe a real-world example of that. And we can pass it on for protection for the right amount of time, or we can start to think more cleverly about what information we're actually going to put into our cloud implementations that we're thinking of. So many organizations now are saying, we're moving information to the cloud, or we're considering moves to the cloud, or we have moved to the cloud and it's costing us more money than we expected. But that's usually because people are doing things in the same way that they did with on-premise infrastructure. They're doing it in the same way in the cloud. And I talk to people from AWS and from Azure, and they tell me that, well, actually, it's not designed in that way. We need to box more clever and be much more considerate about what we store in cloud technologies. We can help with that by classifying the right information for the right store for the right amount of time, and, for instance, for the right amount of analysis by a big data engine within AWS, for one, or Google Cloud. Doesn't really matter. So hopefully that makes some sense. And what I'm going to do is try and move on to the next slide now, if it lets me. Yes, real-world example. So this one's really, really useful. I took it out for a while because people started rolling their eyes at GDPR, but I think now that we're seeing that the standard is being applied, and in my view, that's a good thing because we've had some examples of where GDPR has been applied to organizations where they should be looking after our information. I'm sure those organizations will go on to implement some extremely rigorous and well thought out governance strategies moving forward. They certainly should do. Others are thinking about it much more seriously, or re-evaluating what they've already implemented. This one that we work with is a major prestige automotive manufacturer. And there was a chance IT discussion, a standard storage refresh project that they were doing. They were just literally going to add some more storage into their infrastructure. And all of a sudden, their chief information security officer piped up and said, I think we really ought to be doing something about GDPR here, because we're being asked by the board to consider GDPR and make sure we're GDPR ready. Now, that led to a rather large discussion and a tender and a POC. And the partners that were working with them, one of them, some of them didn't understand how to help. Some of them did, and we were brought in. And the good news there was that we were able to help that organization understand that not only would they be able to help, not only would be able to help with GDPR and the storage refresh project and the rationalization of it, we would also be able to help them with their move to a cloud technology, because they'd be moving the right information and at the right time for the right reasons. That helps them do things in a much more efficient, cost-effective way. In order to help them as well, one of the crucial things we did was talk to their their lawyer, their compliance officer, and their legal governance counsel, because it was them that needed to report on GDPR, not IT. IT needed to deliver the platform. They didn't want the responsibility of having to respond to requests from a lawyer every time one came in, and it being massively urgent. So what we did was we helped IT deliver the platform, and then the lawyer owned via their own role-based login the reports and the governance and the legal depositions that they had to make based on the requirements they had. The lawyer was so impressed that they ended up paying for half the project. And actually, the storage refresh project saved money as well, because it didn't need to buy as much storage as it first thought, because we were able to delete an awful lot of non-business related information. Now, we work with a lot of organizations worldwide, and we work with around about 1,500 Europe-wide to understand what sort of patterns of information storage small to medium size businesses and enterprises and large enterprises and governments have. Now, rough and tough, organizations could, if they were really, really ruthless, get rid of 50% of all the information they store. And if anybody's interested after this webcast, I can pass on some really useful anonymized information about how Django Unchained cost one organization tens of thousands of pounds a year to store on tier 0 storage. Absolutely staggering. Somebody thinking that a free hooky copy of Django Unchained didn't cost anybody any money, but actually it turned out to be one of the most expensive DVDs ever bought. That's just one example. If we can cut down that amount of information store, we can start and automate that process of how it's done. We can start to deliver other projects for the business. And typically speaking, organizations can save around about 75% of the effort they put into protecting information just by having good information governance. And that's a much better story than protect yourself from a fine, get some insurance. I certainly think so anyway. And I'd like to be much more positive when we engage with organizations than I typically hear around the industry. So hopefully I'm taking some information, and Amy's going to send out a bit of a freebie to help you understand via your own personal proof of concepts how we can do this in a very easy manner for you at the end of this webinar. Meanwhile, I'm going to hand over to Hugo now, and I'll be available for questions at the end today. Thank you very much for listening to me so far. Hugo, over to you via Amy.
Hi, can you hear me now? Good morning, everybody.
I certainly can, Hugo.
Okay, great. My name is Hugo Bradfield. I've recently joined Veritas, started in December. I've been working with Veritas products for the last 18 years. So Dan and myself are pretty old Veritas employees as such. I came from a customer and then from the partner perspective, where I worked for many years, and now recently joined in Reading in Green Park. I've previously worked with Aptar in one of my previous roles, the product I'm going to talk about shortly. And as Dan is also talking about compliance, Aptar, the recently acquisition of Veritas, I'm going to speak of compliance in a slightly different way, more from a backup and basically backup perspective, not just backup. I want to basically give you some information regarding the product so you can go to the market and spot those opportunities. And then obviously we can, or reach out to us and we can assist you to see all those deals. Don't know how much you know about Aptar. I'm just going to cover a few aspects. And if there's a need or a requirement for us to do any further more detailed presentations or even live demos, reach out to us. We're glad to assist. So from an Aptar perspective, a lot of people are under the impression it's just a replacement for Ops Center and reporting. Aptar is a much bigger, broader product. We do analytics as well as reporting, and where it plays a big role is from a chargeback perspective. So from a backup perspective, where we can see a big difference in the market and a big gain for the product is due to the fact that we have the ability to identify hosts within the customer storage environment, within the VMware, from a SAN switch perspective, and also from a backup product. We don't just do net backup, we can do Commvault, Veeam, Rubrik, TSM, majority of the other backup products we support. So the nice thing about Aptar is so we can have generic reports that can span the entire customer data center, hosts that are connected to storage, whether it's physical, VM, hosts that are connected to the SAN fabric, hosts that are being backed up by multiple backup products. You can actually run a report that will give you information and let you know what servers are not being backed up in your environment. We all know projects get kicked off, servers get spun up, and to keep track of those, it's not always possible. Some stuff slipped through the cracks. And then from a compliance perspective, this will give you the ability to identify those hosts and then make sure the backups are in place, because it's always crucial when restore requests come in and then to find out that servers aren't being backed up. The other big gain is the RTO and RPO reporting capabilities, where we can basically give you a predictive report where we will be able to show you whether you will be able to meet your SLA. You can set up your own SLAs and timelines within the product, so that we why is it not? Sorry, I've just noticed. Okay, that's great. And I just wanted to go through the different dashboards. Sorry, on the RTO and RPO reporting, we can predict whether your recoveries will be done in your SLA agreement times, and whether it's within a customer itself, or especially for service providers, where it plays a big role from a chargeback perspective, as well as meeting those SLAs for their customers, minimize those penalty costs or avoid penalty costs. The nice thing about Aptar as well, it's very scalable. We have a portal server that can scale extremely well. We have some use cases where Wells Fargo, over 400 million backup jobs over a 13-year period. JP Morgan Chase, they've got 245,000 employees, 57,000 backup client jobs or backup clients. And then one of our other big customers, Deloitte, they've got, say for instance, 60 odd petabytes of storage, 169 arrays, and Aptar is managing those big environments on a daily basis from a reporting analytics perspective and chargeback. And just from a scalability perspective, we have a portal server, which we have then a collector per data center, or depending on your environment, you can have multiple data collectors. And we are extremely lightweight in gathering information from the storage perspective, where we can identify unutilized storage. So if you want to start looking at optimizing your storage or optimizing your backup window, we can identify hotspots in your backup environment. So we can identify where you have problem areas, IO bottlenecking to the net backup appliances. So we can then look at rescheduling or altering the schedules during the night to make sure you have always an optimized environment for those backups and make sure they go through a lot faster. From a storage perspective, we can identify exactly what virtual machines are on what exact array. So if you are running tier 2 or tier 3 applications on tier 1 storage, it's easy to identify. We know from a virtual environment perspective, because VMware takes over, you have no insight in the backend where the storage is actually coming from. And with this product, we can identify that, and you can align your business and make sure that you're utilizing the correct storage for the correct applications. And also identify those VMs that were decommissioned but were never removed from the storage. We can identify all of that information, and we've seen cost savings through a broad spectrum within the customer's storage environment. The main benefit of running Aptar, and where customers see the biggest gains, is if they go for the full suite, where we can basically identify and report on the storage as well as the backup environment. And together with the storage bundle, you get the VMware and the SAN switch packaging. And that will give you an end-to-end single pane of glass dashboard of your entire environment, where you can run statistics. And from a chargeback perspective, you can now identify the costs of an application from per IO usage, CPU, memory, storage, how much storage that application is using on your production arrays, how much storage that application is accumulating on the back end from a backup perspective, whether it's tape or storage or disk appliances. If the customer has data domains, we can plug into that. We can get information from RMAN. So if those DBAs are doing their own backups to disk and they're utilizing tier 1 storage for those backups, we can identify that because we see RMAN as a backup product. So we can catalog that information, and you can report on those backups, and whether it's your company policy or not, you can act accordingly. I don't know how we're doing for time. Then I just wanted to touch base on some real world examples. One of the big banks reclaimed 8.3 petabyte of primary global storage at a big cost saving. And obviously that will allow them to slow down their next purchases of the storage and repurpose that storage into the environment and utilize it when necessary. And then one of the insurance companies, they saw a return on investment within 9 months, where it took 3 full-time employees to do the billing. By utilizing Aptar, the billing was automated, and they could utilize those 3 resources more productively in the rest of the environment. Financial services saw a 2-month return on investment, where they were able to allocate or identify unallocated storage in the environment to be repurposed or used where necessary. And one of the investment banks saw an immediate 1.9 million gain by identifying that misconfigured or misuse of tier 1 storage, specifically backup related, where backups were dumped onto tier 1 storage. They could free that up or point the backups into the right tier of storage and use that tier 1 for those crucial, highly available applications. And I think from my side, I hope that was useful. I can pass back to Dan, and then he can finish off the last couple of slides.
Thank you very much, Hugo.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent. Okay.
Should we open up to questions now, Dan?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. So hopefully you can see the screen here. So if you do have any questions at all, please do pop them in the questions box, which is just at the right-hand side of your screen. Alternatively, we do have our email address there if you do want to submit any outside of the webinar. So I'll just have a look to see if any come through. 1 second. Okay, none so far. Just wait a minute or so, see if any come through.
Okay. Meanwhile, just to recap and reiterate, I honestly believe, and I know from working with customers, that there's a huge amount of potential to save money, do better business, and deliver better projects, better and more projects, by rationalizing information through good information governance. And I know that I've seen an awful lot of benefit to IT organizations, partly because they get a better handle on things themselves through the governance of infrastructure and information, and partly because they're sometimes here, very often, addressing real business requirements for governance based on industry standards or international standards or the legal requirements that they have. And I'll come back to the start. It's why I'm more interested in this than anything I've ever done, because it actually does deliver proper results, partly for the customers that I work with day in, day out through Bytes, and partly because it affects my family. It affects my daughter. She's 10 years old, and she understands, thank goodness, she's being taught at school the importance of putting information in the right places and being careful when I eventually give her a phone. And even with the devices she uses at home, it's incredibly important to her already. So the pressure from the ground up is also going to be something that only increases year on year. And the organizations that are best able to get their hands around this requirement most quickly and most efficiently and most confidently are going to be the ones that succeed the best. And I'm really, really pleased when I can help organizations deliver on that.
Thanks, Dan. So there's just been a couple of questions about the recording. So I will send you all a link to the recording either this afternoon or tomorrow morning. But that's all the questions that we've got today. So thank you so much, Dan and Hugo, for presenting today, and thank you everyone for taking the time out of your busy day to join the webinar. I hope you found it useful. And there will be a couple of questions at the end, so if you would like any further information, please do pop that in there and we will be in touch. Okay, so thanks again everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day today.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you very
Really
much.
appreciate it.
Bye-bye.